G'day, welcome to Insiders. I'm Tony Sewell and I'm here with my mate Rob Ruyak. How's it going, Rob?
I'm great, Tony. How are you? Good to see you.
Good. Excited about this episode today.
I am very, very much. Yes.
So, just a little teaser for everyone. So, we're going to be meeting Lucy Hoag today. She's the co-founder, or she's the founder and CEO of Violet Labs, a SaaS company that's integrating various software tools to create better efficiency in the development process for the manufacturing process for space. So she's got an amazing background. She's worked at Google and Waymo and Lyft and Amazon Kuiper. So just a absolutely impressive background. So
Fantastic,
it'll be a great
courageous
discussion.
person.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
nice. And it was a really good episode last week too, with Jana Spruce. And actually, it was funny. We had all this talk about spacesuits, and not a day after we recorded the interview, there was a really great article that came out, and we'll share a link to it about the company that actually won some of the early contracts to develop the spacesuit. And that was Playtex, the bra and girdle manufacturer, which is just absolutely fascinating story.
Yeah, it was really cool. So Tony, when you sent that to me and I read it, I couldn't help but think about how great an example it was back in the '60s, even where it wasn't a traditional government contractor that actually won the work to do that.
Yeah,
I can't remember the name of the company that actually did win it. It was the prime, but Playtex actually, as a sub, delivered the design and actually the implementation, the build out of those suits. And it just reminded me a lot of what government's been trying to do for years, what a lot of us
yeah,
talk about. And then, and I think especially now, the biggest, I think one of the biggest topics of conversation, especially in the DC area, is how it's not going to necessarily be those traditional companies all the time that need to win the contracts and do the work. It's going to be these non-traditional defense contractors, commercial companies, software companies, hardware companies, you name it, that now might have easier access to government. It's still going to be tough, but
yeah,
it's going to be. I think we're going to see more frequency of it, which is super exciting.
yeah. And if for folks, if you didn't hear the episode, it sort of came up where she was talking about when you go into the sort of the fabrication area in the sewing room where a lot of these where the space suits are put together, and we're sort of the talking about STEM and STEAM, the sort of the introduction of art into these learning areas. So it just shows like how different disciplines and sort of functions can be involved in space, which it's really interesting.
Yeah, it was cool. There was even somewhat of a design thinking
Yeah,
type of approach they took. Like they put it
yeah.
on. I think someone had to wear it, and they had to play football in it.
Football, yeah, and he played it for a couple of hours just to
Yeah.
test out how he could.
American football. Pretty sure
Yeah,
it was American
it
football, but who
was American
cares?
football.
It's
Yeah, it
still a great
wasn't
story.
rugby or Aussie rules. It was pretty funny though, and so I'll post the link where they talk about when they were doing the bake off, and they had a couple of the other big defense primes there, and one of them, obviously the Playtex one, they ultimately won the spot on the program in their own right, but some of the other defense companies, like the helmet blew off one, one of the suits, like just incredible.
It's cool. It's definitely worth a read.
Yeah,
We'll add the link to it.
yeah,
It's great. Yeah.
cool. So what else is catching your eye this week, Rob?
I think the thing that was most interesting to me, and I think this was about a week ago, was the announcement from Cerberus Capital that they recently raised a $75 million fund to invest in companies across biotech, transportation, energy, AI, and defense.
Yeah,
And I believe the CEO was from Incutel, which is CIA's venture arm in the government. So, why did I like that? I think it's because a lot of people have been wondering when is private equity, when is venture capital actually going to start in full force thinking about investment theories around defense tech and supporting
mm,
the country, both national security and defense. I think a lot of them it's tough. It's tough to work through. We've talked about this in previous episodes, that it's tough to work with government. It's tough to understand the contracting around it. But I think the opportunity right now is really, really good. Number
Yeah.
one, because I think we're starting to see these large, like, recompete contracts, such as the next generation C2 contract potentially going through DIU, which means it's going to be awarded potentially to some non-traditional government contractors with the government contractors. So, you look at that and you kind of you get excited because our government defense, they now can hopefully access these great innovations.
Yeah.
And then I think with the rebalancing in defense across the globe, especially with the US, I think we're going to see even more focus on investment over in Europe and other parts of the world as well, but in defense tech. So it's super exciting, and I thought that announcement was basically validating a lot of hypotheses people have been having the last couple of weeks or couple of months.
That is very interesting. I was listening to Chad Anderson from Space Capital, recorded a podcast and released it yesterday. Just they put out a quarterly report just of what they're seeing in the market, and obviously we're sort of they were talking about how we're moving into a situation where potentially it's going to be the economy is going to be challenging for startups, and I think they see some potential headwinds for startups in the pursuing the commercial space, but real opportunity on the defense side, and some of these defense technologies that are going to be overlapping into these big programs like Golden Dome and space situational awareness. They were talking. I think it was on this one. They were talking about as different government and the US government starts thinking more about not only defensive capability, but offensive capability in space as well. So, definitely moving into an interesting period.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, I think complementing what our defense industrial base does really, really well is going to be exciting to see, because I think the intersection of both is what's going to be the most powerful and frankly the most beneficial to the country and the warfighter and our partners and allies. So
Yeah, very good. All right. Well, I think that's probably a good time for us now to bring in Lucy. It's going to be a really fun discussion. Hearing from someone that's come from the big names and sort of taken that leap into entrepreneurship and starting a company that's been super successful. So how about we bring her in?
Let's do it. She's great. Can't wait.
All right, welcome back, and welcome Lucy Hoag from Violet Labs.
Great to be here. Thanks
Hey,
very much.
Lucy.
Thanks so much for coming. We really appreciate it. When we were starting up this idea, you were one of the very first people to come back quickly and say you were keen to support us. So really looking forward to the discussion today.
You're making me sound desperate.
I didn't mean it to sound like that.
I'm just joking. Super excited to be here. Thanks very much.
Yeah, awesome. So before we get in, perhaps you could just give us a little bit of a primer on Violet Labs and who you are.
Yeah, let's do it. So I'll actually start with the second half of your question. Typically, I do that just to give some context. So my background is aerospace engineering. Spent most of my career on the hardware side, building really fun stuff and helping others build fun stuff. Quit that about 3 years ago, 3.5. Probably should start saying 4, to build Violet Labs, which is a software startup. And what we are building is tackling the problem of when you're building hardware, you have all these different software tools you rely on, like typically maybe dozens, and they don't talk to each other. It's this very fragmented, kind of disjointed workflow. And so our platform, Violet, solves that with no-code connectors to all these tools and creates this really powerful home base for engineering teams. And we're excited for that to hopefully kind of transform how stuff is built.
That's awesome. And you've got such an interesting background. Like I know you studied aerospace engineering, and but you've worked at like the tech royalty. Like you're you got Waymo, Lyft, Google, Amazon. You worked with at USC, like a part of the Viterbi lab. Like, I mean, it's an incredible background. Can you? I'd just love to hear a little bit about that. And what have been the experiences that really kind of shaped your early career and sort of how you ended up here?
Yeah, I feel super fortunate. It's almost a pretty embarrassing bingo card, but yeah, effectively, it all started in high school. I did want to be an astronaut, so I chose USC for that reason and studied astronautical engineering. That got me into the Information Sciences Institute. We have a small space engineering research center, so building CubeSats in your early 20s. That was awesome. And first piece of good luck is it brought me to DARPA out of grad school because of some of the research we were doing. So right away, thrust into the government side of the space world, which was pretty fascinating and actually just loved it. I adored, frankly, kind of how important you feel like your work is truly really important, and you're read into these programs that you just can't believe. You almost have a sense of like responsibility to the country that you're getting to work on them. So that was super cool. I was there for about 3 years. Second piece of really good fortune, around that time, Google was starting their first satellite constellation. It was actually not Skybox. It was a secret program at the time. It was instead of imaging like Skybox, it was doing internet from space. So you can imagine some modern day kind of equivalents of that, that may have bits and pieces from that program. So that brought me to Google, which was like, I still remember the day I've had the on-site interview. I like called my mom, like, I can't believe it. It was just like a dream. And working there was even more of a dream. The interesting part is right when I joined, they canceled this satellite program. And so it was a huge program, and truly like aerospace engineers from all over the country are now at Google, and we're like, okay, what do we do now? So it's just the beginning of a really interesting journey. What a lot of us did was the program turned into a drone-based internet program. So we were building a high altitude, long endurance glider, basically, that had the ability to serve internet. And we tested that out in really cool ways at like Spaceport America and drones. That was canceled. So I started in space, then I went to air. I'm in stratosphere.
Did this lead to Loon? Is it?
Part of that led to Loon. Yeah.
Okay.
So that was an X, actually a totally different part of Google. This was even pre-alphabet. So we were in Access and they were in X. Lots of duplication at Google. When Ruth Porat came in, she really did a great job of being like, hey guys, we gotta like stop blowing cash. So then it got a lot less fun. But so a lot of that went to Loon. A lot of us went to actually wireless last mile. So now I'm like terrestrial. And from there, I actually directly went into Waymo. So kind of interesting how it all came to be, but self-driving cars are sort of like a satellite on the ground. It's kind of cheesy, but it's sort of true in many different ways. And so I had this detour away from space, which I had always wanted to be in, through air breathing stuff, and then Waymo for self-driving. Then I went to Lyft, which is really cool because it was basically the opposite of my Waymo experience. At Waymo, you're with this gigantic team, super brilliant. Most of the cars were like already built, they're already testing. Lyft, we got there's 30 of us, and this was called Level 5, the group, and we had to start from scratch. And it was so cool. Like, all right, what do we do first? And to end the diatribe, after a few years there, I wanted to get back to aerospace. And so I went to Amazon Kuiper, and it didn't last too long before the itch to build Violet Labs became too strong. And that's why I'm here.
That's a great story, Lucy. So tell us a little bit more about what inspired you to start Violet Labs, and what is it exactly? Like, tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so the inspiration for the company and the product is pretty classic founder stories story in a lot of ways, basically born out of frustration. So, I feel really lucky to have worked at these like world-class institutions, and you imagine you get there and they're building rockets and self-driving cars, and it must be the best software in the world, and it's the total opposite. In fact, it was shocking to me how consistently, through all these different places and over all these years, It actually got worse in some ways. And, I don't mean to disparage Kuiper. Amazon is a fantastic place, and, I adore AWS. But because they have this very like narrative driven kind of work style, it really made the lack of connectivity of your software and really your data, your engineering data, it made that very acute. So we viscerally felt the frustration. Yeah. So that's what primarily led me to quit my job and just, stop complaining and see if I could build the software that I wanted. So again, speaking of like the problem that Violet is solving, it's connectivity. It's kind of that connective tissue between all these software tools. So if you imagine a hardware development lifecycle, you start with kind of ideation, requirements management, get into CAD, mechanical and electrical, into product lifecycle, MES, purchasing. Um, these are all totally siloed, and the state of the art is truly to hire small armies of overpriced people like me that are basically human network switches for all this data. So instead, Violet is endeavoring to build no-code connectors that any dumb hardware engineer like myself can use. You don't have to know what an API is or what a SQL query is. Bring that data into Violet. It's structured into our own purpose-built ontology, and that allows some of the basics, which is like, I kind of describe it as the base of the Maslow's hierarchy for a hardware engineering team. You just get your data in one place. You can see it in a single pane of glass. You can report on it in an easy way and sync it between these tools. And from there, the cool part is it opens up this whole world of really powerful features that are suddenly pretty easy because your data is already structured, clean, in the same place. Yeah.
That's awesome. And so is it wrong to describe this as one of the buzzwords you hear all the time out there, like digital thread, as an example? Or is
No,
that the
absolutely not.
same
That's
kind of concept? Yeah.
Yeah, I can throw so many buzzwords at you. You'll be surprised. Definitely digital thread is one of them. We even go harder on the buzzword. We kind of call it like an organic digital thread within Violet, or maybe an organic model-based system engineering. Um, Another couple ways to describe it is like Zapier, but for hardware.
Mm.
Data federation. Uh, but yeah, essentially what you're doing is linking all this data in one common place.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think a lot of the work that at least I know Tony and I have done over the years, this is absolutely a very much needed capability across both, older kind of enterprise customers as well as, the new companies that are even born on the cloud, right? As an
Yeah.
example. So how have you been? I think the hope that Tony and I have are that we give folks like you a voice to those that are, kind of at the precipice of wanting to start their own company. So one of the things we wanted to ask you was, so now that we understand what Violet Labs is and kind of your passion and the problems you were trying to solve, how did you actually validate it? As you were, feeling more confident that this is something that actually could be a capability that would be wanted and needed, and you could sell it in the market.
Yeah, an important piece for sure. To be honest, a big part of my validation was kind of cheating. It was, through personal experience and with all my colleagues and peers and coworkers knowing from these years of experience that they would need something like this, or even more like they deserve something like this. So a little bit of a blind jump there, blind faith, but immediately upon starting the business, went into customer interviews and discovery, and followed the mom test, which someone introduced right away, and I hadn't heard of it. Basically, you can't just go and have a customer interview with your friend at Toyota and say, "Hey, I'm building this cool product. It's going to do this, this, and this. Like, does that sound cool? Would you like it?" Like, of course they're going to be
You're gonna
nice.
say
And,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, sure, right. You can't do that. You almost have to flip it on its head and
Yeah.
ask what they need, ask what their problems are, and how much they would pay to have it fixed. So we tried to do a lot of that.
So
Yeah.
why is
Well,
it the mom test?
It's
Can you
kind of like your
clarify
mom,
that?
yeah, good point. I guess I kind of glossed over that. Your mom's going to try and be like uplifting and like, yeah, honey, this sounds super cool. I'm so proud of you. I don't know. I didn't read the whole book, so.
Yeah, no, I was half joking. I wanted you, I
Oh,
wanted you to because I mean, moms are. I love my mom. she's very supportive in everything I do. But I don't know. I just want you to clarify it.
Yeah, I guess
Leave it at that.
She's not going to tell you you've got a bad idea.
there you go.
Exactly. I thank you, Tony. I'm glad that you.
Yeah.
It must. I think about sort of my own desire for an entrepreneurial journey a lot, and like the self-confidence and courage to do that, like to leave a massive company, and the compensation and all that comes with it must have been kind of daunting. I am interested though, like were there things that were harder than you expected? Like, I mean, it's not like I haven't started a company, so I don't know the full. But were there things that you thought, oh, that'll be that's a slam dunk, but were actually really hard?
Oh man, almost every single part of it was harder than I thought. Yeah.
Did you do it on your? Did you start on your own, or did you have a co-founder?
I started technically on my own at first, and then quickly was talking to a fellow Kuiper employee, and she was kind of excited about similar things, so we decided to start together. So the two of us started, and I think for the first year or so, we're doing it together. And she was fantastic. We ended up being quite similar, I think, in role, and so it really wasn't a good co-founder pairing. Interestingly, that is one of the pieces that is way harder than you think. And everyone warns you, this is the number one thing you have to get right first. And most people fail. And that was so true. And I found through that, I think, whether this is whatever this says about my personality, I think I'm probably meant to be a solo founder. I don't think I really would have done well in a pair or with three of us.
Why would you say that? Why would you say that, Lucy? I'm curious.
I'm really greedy for data is maybe one way of putting, like, perfectionist, maybe control freak, but it's more, I want to understand how every piece works. I want to understand why we're making the decisions we are. I'm also kind of like living and breathing this every second of every day. It's sort of a lifelong kind of thing for me. Goes back to my graduate research, which was on something vaguely similar. It was building a tool for software design. So yeah, I don't know. It was just difficult, and I'm sure it was difficult for her as well. So
yeah, no, I hope you weren't offended by me asking. It was, I'm super interested in how teams come together and how you can optimize the efficiency of a team and a group. But I've never started a company, and it's interesting. Sometimes we meet these companies that are founded by two people or more. And you kind of wonder because you're trying to figure almost everything out. That's tough.
yeah,
It's really messy, And if you do it in a larger company, there's a little, there's rules of the road, there's role definitions, there's ways people operate and collaborate. Typically, there's a culture already established, with maybe
right.
even like a loose social contract. There's something there, So I find it really interesting how people start companies and how they can try to figure out how to have compliments, and get it off the ground, because it's almost like everything you do as a small company getting started has to click, because there's so many questions and so many unknowns. So it's just interesting.
I love that you use the word efficiency and optimizing. That too is all I think about all the time, because it's all about how lean can you build this product and this machine. And by definition of having two founders at the helm, there's going to be some overlap and there's going to be some communication latency, and it didn't work for me. It has to be as efficient as possible, or it's just not going to work.
Yeah.
Awesome. One of the things we actually talked to one of the earlier interviews. We're talking to Laura Crabtree from Epsilon 3. You probably know Laura.
I do.
She's fantastic, and another example of someone who's building software for a very hardware centric industry, which is space. And it was super interesting how you sort of talked about that was what you sort of grew up in on the hardware side. I mean, historically and still today, space businesses have been really slow to adopt cloud native process. What's been your experience from that respect, talking to these companies and having them sort of start thinking about this more software centric mindset?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's pretty fascinating. So a large part, I think there's a few reasons that feed into why aerospace and defense and probably some other highly regulated industries weren't able to adopt cloud until much later, and as a byproduct, weren't able to innovate on their software until much later. A lot of that is that regulatory aspect. So you simply can't use something on the cloud if you have ITAR and EAR compliance, export control constraints. And interestingly, in the last decade or so or less, that's been fixed. Like we have these technologies of GovCloud and Azure and GCP even. And that provides this foundation. And then it's a little bit of a unlock for the rest of the infrastructure to start building up, and those kind of picks and shovels that actually um, make it a reasonable lift for these companies to use some of that. So I think that's how we saw like the timing of it and strategized a bit about that. But we also there's a few things that were really important to me when we started, and one of them was again, maybe this goes back to I'm pretty greedy, but kind of anticipated that in order for us to have the diversity and the volume of customers that we'd need to be sustainable, it probably couldn't be just cloud. Like that just wasn't going to work. So from day one, we made a lot of pretty serious upfront investments, and they were costly in like terms of time. One was we are super flexible to all the security compliance kind of needs you could have across the spectrum, from like nothing to fully air gapped. So we are fully we're cloud native and based on AWS. We have a completely identical platform that's AWS GovCloud, and identical to the user, I should say. And in addition, we architected everything from the ground up, truly from day one to, and sorry in advance, to use as few, almost zero AWS services as we could.
Yeah.
Because if you want to go be on-prem with someone who's not on that, it's this huge lift. So we're fully cloud agnostic, and we can be seamlessly deployed on-prem and air-gapped environments. And we're working hard on our compliance journey. We have SOC 2 Type 2, working on CMMC, and we'll get to hopefully FedRAMP someday. So yeah, almost by definition, you just have to be so many different things in order for it to serve a wide net of customers. And we are actually today kind of reaping those rewards. People are really surprised to hear, oh, you're on cloud, but you can also, we can do either one. And it's a really valuable strategy, it turns out.
Yeah, I think it is a hard decision, especially for small companies, to figure out what kind of optionality can I provide my
Yeah,
customers, because you also have established companies, you have younger companies, all of whom could benefit from what you provided with Violet Labs, but they might have different backgrounds that they take even into a small company, and familiarity with environments that they're used to doing. If they come
absolutely.
from a
Yeah.
large defense contractor, a lot of folks in this industry are coming out of NASA, for example, right? So they all kind of bring with them their own experiences and understanding of how to use these different platforms. So what is the target for Violet Labs in with respect to your customers? I heard you say FedRAMP, so I'm assuming that you have systems integrators that serve government and government itself. So what are your target customers, and what might that mix look like, or what does it look like,
Yeah.
if you can
Yes.
share?
So
Yeah.
our ICP, that profile is pretty broad. If you're not getting my pattern here, making a bit of a broken record, um, it's a bunch of different segments. So the primary is definitely folks building complex hardware products, and today our kind of sweet spot is for sure with smaller startups to medium-sized startups to small businesses. But interestingly, if again you picture like a spectrum, and maybe this is small startups, commercial, and then DoD heavy primes. The most interest we get is on the total opposite sides of the spectrum, and they have completely different need, but like the principle is the same. And then within that, there's multiple verticals as well. So we're mostly aerospace and energy, and then broader defense, as well as medical and universities. And that gets into kind of the system engineering. So pretty interesting. I did not anticipate that. We wanted to be very domain agnostic, and we will have over time more and more verticals coming in, robotics, consumer, but energy. We have a lot of energy customers, which is great. I think a lot of them are probably ex SpaceX and ex aerospace people. But yeah,
what kind of energy companies? Because it sounds like the way you describe it is that you've designed it to be agnostic to maybe supporting
yeah,
high volume manufacturing as well as highly customized but low volume manufacturing. It sounds like so in energy specifically. Like, how do you what kind of companies are
yeah.
not the names, but what kind of what are they
Profile,
building? What are they manufacturing? Yeah.
Yeah, and I can't share all the names or even details because it might give it away, but we do have
Mm.
some nuclear energy customers that we have on our website and that we can talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, a lot of these, our sweet spot again is more low volume. So when you get to that high volume manufacturing, there's less of a need for what we have, but it's the maybe low volume, high margin, high complexity, 1,000-line assemblies. And a key part of it is they're moving really fast. Typically, that's kind of the important piece, and that's where it's interesting. On the government side, you typically don't have that time to market pressure, but you do have a lot of legacy tools that really need some connectivity.
Can you give any? I'm just looking on your website now. I mean, you see like the logos of all of these super familiar software platforms that are used for all bunch of different tools. Can you give an example of like a particularly sort of impactful integration and like how and the I guess what it means to the person's executing the role in terms like, is this about saving cost, time? Obviously, there's a big efficiency part of it, but I'd love to just hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it's definitely cost savings and time savings. Definitely introduces like risk mitigation earlier on, but it also introduces totally new features that you really would have a hard time doing otherwise. And so I'll explain kind of what I mean. So for a couple of our earliest customers, our wedge and how we started to kind of monetize and really get interest was pretty specific actually, and pretty small. It was getting data from a legacy PLM into your MES or a purchasing system or any of these downstream tools. So for example, Teamcenter, we're a Siemens partner, and that's been a huge piece of our product since day one. It's pretty difficult to integrate with Teamcenter. Very few companies do it. So we have the ability to get data out of this kind of, sorry, Siemens, like kind of archaic system, and that includes files. And once that's in Violet, you have this much nicer front end to have any of like your purchasing team or folks on the shop floor access these items. And it's the licensing is fine. We're not taking away licenses that otherwise would have been purchased from Siemens, because they aren't going to be doing authoring of CAD models in NX or anything like that. So it gets this data much more accessible in Violet, and then they want it pushed to an MES, so like Ion or Fusion, or maybe their ERP like NetSuite. And it's at its simplest, just populating inventory. And otherwise, this is something that is manual, which is this drives me absolutely bonkers. We have all these engineers at these fast moving teams building incredibly important stuff, and they're literally copy pasting like part numbers. So huge waste of time, hugely inefficient,
and really prone to mistakes too.
Very prone to mistakes, a lot of human in the loop. So just by doing that, it's this huge unlock. And we are, the best thing you can hear as a founder, as a small company, is they're like, we would be scared shitless if you guys went away. Like, please don't go away. We don't know what we do. So it's really solving pain, which is great. So, and then quickly just to add on to that. So, that's the easy part, or not easy. That's the kind of simple part, point A to point B, data transfer. But now you've got your NetSuite POs, your manufacturing execution system work orders and POs, your parts, your files, all in one system. They're structured in such a way that they share the same part numbers, revisions. We have full version history. So we have the ability to, if you're familiar with the tooling out of SpaceX, there's a very popular tool called Warp Drive that kind of feeds their entire development. And what Violet provides is a warp drive-like capability with the added power that it can be any system. So it can be Team Center, or it can be Windchill, or it can be Duro. And you type in a part number or an assembly number, and you get everything across all of these apps in a nice report that you can filter and sort, configure, and it'll update as things update in the source end. So that one has been really popular with a lot of our companies who are like in that design and build and purchase stage, and they're purchasing and have inventory adjustments and tests across, a lot of different parts. And it's a pretty powerful tool now for them.
Yeah, to your point around the customer being scared about if you went away, it made me think of some of these larger companies I used to work with probably 15 years ago. And some of the work I did was around just like complexity reduction, like looking at architecture and just trying to determine like what would be a future state architecture to actually have a more, integrated data story, and be able to actually query information across a whole supply chain, as an example.
Love that.
And I'll never forget there was one meeting, and I had a technical. One of my colleagues was like very deep with database design, and the first question he said is, "So, what does your data dictionary look like?" And I remember this guy was at the table, and he's like, "Hey, where's Jim? Jim?" And Jim, I swear it was a couple of days later, but Jim enters this meeting. Jim was a data dictionary because he had worked at this company for 35 years.
Obsessed with the story.
And
That's
he
great.
was used to writing SQL queries and understanding where all the data was. And I remember we asked him to write like a entity relationship diagram, if you're familiar with those data models, and he just got up on a whiteboard and he started drawing stuff. It was like, please, I hope Jim does not get hit by a bus, because the supply chain, visibility is not going to happen. So it just reminded me of that, which funny enough, I think is a real concern with a lot of companies that do have a lot of their assets, IT assets, tied up in a lot of legacy IT environments with people that really don't program in Fortran anymore. Or frankly, funny enough, a lot of people aren't really designing relational databases anymore.
Right.
So I think there's a great opportunity for companies like, and what you all offer, to provide that visibility, and also I think some risk reduction, and using more, future state software platforms for some of this stuff. So it's pretty interesting.
Love that.
Yeah, I hope Jim's still around. If you're out there, Jim.
Jim, we're hiring.
So, Lucy, just to kind of tie this sort of back, what does the next 3 to 5 years look like for Violet Labs? Like, what's your kind of vision for the company?
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. It's obviously a really exciting time with everything going on with AI. And interestingly, thinking of like entity relationship diagrams and ontologies, we're almost at this point where you can see a future where you can skip all that and have that purely driven by AI and Gen AI. We think it's going to be really helpful that we do have all this data structured. So we're obviously continuing on for that. But yeah, the kind of North Star that we see for Violet, and to this day is something I say in like every demo, is for this to be kind of the home base for your engineering team and the first tool you log into in the morning. So you get to the office, and whether you're a mechanical engineer or supply chain or you're a manager, it's where you have all of the activity from your team across purchasing, operations, and it can be also a launch pad if you are a power user and some other tool to go there. And I think this will really transform what the day-to-day life for a hardware engineer is like. Obviously, that efficiency will be huge. The network effects you get from having all your users kind of immersed in this data will be huge. Kind of going back to similar to your point, Rob, about migration from legacy systems or trying to get legacy data digitized. There's also a need to just have things centrally, because even if that person's there, you don't always ask Jim, or you don't always know where to look. And so many errors and inaccuracies and things happened in my career that I'm like, why don't we just have a place where you can look this up? So so that's definitely how I picture us when I picture a modern engineering team. And of course, from there, you know, if you imagine having all of this data from very disparate, different tool sets, and it's structured and it's over time, it has a full version history, there's wildly powerful things you can do from an AI perspective. And we obviously have some cool plans around that, starting from the very simple, which would be, you know, using open source foundation models, having a chatbot kind of capability, so a Violet assistant that can help you with your requirement generation. From there, actually training on your data, so you get this customer-centric chatbot. So it's like, hey, Violet, tell me about this, you know, design change, what prompted that, or 3 years ago, XYZ. And even from there, we picture this kind of wild capability where you can even train among customers. So obviously a difficult thing from like an IP perspective, but from an if you kind of had this opt-in methodology, you could have a couple or many different organizations who are building similar things. You could build this super foundation model based on that data, and it becomes potentially this really valuable national security asset. That's something that we might end up needing, even though today you would never see Boeing and Lockheed, you know, training models on their data combined. We might not always have, you know, the luxury of saying no to that. So,
yeah,
a little out there, but
well, if you build
yeah.
a chatbot, I have one request. Can you call it Jim? and I'm pretty sure.
Ask Jim.
Ask Jim.
Yes.
There you go.
Yes.
There you go.
You have my word. That's awesome. I love it.
So, Lucy, this was really fun to talk to you. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank
We
you.
love to end these, and we're testing this out a little bit, but we like to end
All
it with
right.
something that might tell everybody a little bit more about you on the personal side. So here's the question: what's your favorite space movie? Could be scientifically accurate or completely and utterly ridiculous.
Obviously, a very hard question for a space dork. So my first answer is Gravity. I just will always remember the feeling of the scene where Sandra Bullock hits the ground and it's like, oh, thank God. Like this phenomenon that we
That is a good
see
one.
and feel every day. You're just like feeling it. So yeah, I loved that one. I'm a big Sandra Bullock fan. I'm also an elder millennial, so I kind of grew up on Spaceballs. Anyone?
It was funny you mentioned that because I was scrolling on Instagram today, and the guy that was one of the guys combing the desert.
Okay.
He was talking on Instagram about, I've been in 200. I've got 200 entries on IMDb, and everyone remembers is I'm the guy that said we ain't found shit.
I love it.
I think, yeah, but he was in Police Academy too. He was a famous actor. Yeah, Michael. I'm trying to remember his last name.
Was it Winslow?
Yes, that's who it is. Yeah, he was also in Police Academy. He was great. He used to do all the sound effects and everything. I was going to say that was one of my favorite movies. Number one, because it was super interesting, but it was also had a good memory. My dad, who absolutely just loves that goofy type of comedy. I think like Leslie Nielsen was one of his favorite actors of all time. Like all the like the Naked Guns and everything. And I remember he took me to go see Spaceballs in a movie theater. And I excuse me, I think he started laughing right when the ship started from the very beginning to all the way to the end of the movie.
Amazing.
And I think to this day, if I were to watch it with him again, he would still do the same thing. But that movie is hilarious. I think I could probably quote 90% of it.
Is that your favorite, Rob? I actually prepared this week. I wasn't prepared for the question last week. And
it's better when you're not prepared, by the way, Tony. Just listen to the previous sessions. Yeah. What was yours?
I love it.
Event Horizon. So
I haven't seen that.
It was it came out in the early 2000s. It had Lawrence Fishburne, Sam Neill. It was about this, they created this ship called the Event Horizon that disappeared. And then this crew find it, and it was able to create a black hole and go through space, but it ended up going into like this other dimension was like hell or something, and then it came back and it was like it gave me nightmares for ages. But
sounds uplifting. Yeah.
It's such a cool movie. If it is really it's a cool movie if you're into that sort of stuff.
We could probably talk about this forever, but
Interstellar
was really good, and I think it was
close second.
Was it the 10th anniversary? I think they re-released it in the movie theaters again. It was great. Yeah, I went and saw it recently, but yeah.
Well, Lucy, thanks so much for joining us. This was a really interesting discussion.
Thank you.
If people would like to learn more about you and Violet Labs, where can people find you?
Yes, so violetlabs.com is the number one spot. We've got a place for you to sign up for a demo. It'll likely be myself or someone on the team. You can sign up directly, sign up for our newsletter there, and we promise not to spam. And LinkedIn is also a great place. So I think it's Violet Labs Inc. And if you'd like to shoot us a note, hello@violetlabs.com. We'll answer there.
Thanks, Lucy. And thanks, everyone, for joining us. Please rate and review. And if you also want to follow us on LinkedIn or YouTube, because we're also producing a video as well. So other than that, great to see you both, and look forward to seeing you all in a couple of weeks. Thanks.
Yep.
It's a lot of fun. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.